It's so fun. I've gotten emails from people saying, "Oh, thanks so much. Like I just got a great surf session because of your app." And you know, people there, you get critics, and that's painful and it stings because this is, it's your baby, and somebody's attacking your product, which is you. And so, it's a bit of a roller coaster, but in the end, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a really fun, it's a really fun endeavor, and I just want Swellify to be useful to people and to help people surf more. That's it. Like that's the whole mission, is to help you surf more.
This was Tobias Work, the man behind Swellify, a new surf forecast app. Tobias cares about forecast accuracy as much as I care about people being nice to each other in the lineup, which is to say, an awful lot. That's one of the reasons why Swellify is currently only available in New Zealand. Tobias wants to get it right. Don't worry, it's coming soon to a spot near you. Actually, it's already available for Venice because that's my local break and I asked nicely. Let's talk surf forecasting and why it sucks so much for surfers. Welcome to the Wipeout Weekly, the surf podcast for beginners, wannabe surfers, and seasoned wipeout enthusiasts. No hype, no filler, just the news and truths about what it takes to be surfing. I'm your host, Suze Wilson. Let's go out. Tobias, my man, how are the waves in New Zealand today?
The waves in New Zealand right now we're on a bit of a flat spell, at least in the bottom of the North Island here in Wellington. So unfortunately, not much in the forecast. There hasn't been much activity here, but it's somewhere in New Zealand, I guarantee you it's firing because there's always something going on here.
Okay, you're saying flat. Does it mean that it's really flat, like a pancake? Or are we talking about like ankle slappers 1 to 2, which would be my preference?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I guess I'm applying my own view on the forecast. It's look, you can get out there if you have enough board. So yeah, there's probably a little bit of something out there.
And you're from Boston, and now you're based in New Zealand. What would you say the biggest difference between surfing in Massachusetts, on the East Coast, is and surfing in New Zealand?
Yeah, so I grew up surfing on Nantucket Island, actually. My dad took me out there when I was about 8, and I was just hooked immediately. But then I lived in the Boston area for, extended period of time. And I would say, living in Boston, there are not very many surf breaks that are super accessible in the Boston area. So you usually have to either drive north to New Hampshire or south to Rhode Island. And so the forecast becomes very important because you're going to be making a big trip. It's at least an hour to get to any decent surf breaks, usually an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours in some cases. The same problem exists in New Zealand. You still have to drive to go get the surf. Living in Wellington, it's really nice because there is a decent surf break about 15 minutes from where I live. And so it's a lot closer here. But I would say the main difference between surfing in the Northeast versus surfing in New Zealand is that in the Northeast, you're always waiting for hurricane swells. And so hurricane season is a very exciting time. But in New Zealand, there's always something going on. There's always these huge weather systems, either to the north or to the south, that are basically spinning off waves. And there's usually something in New Zealand that's really, really, really good at any given time. So
apart from right now when it's all flat as a pancake.
Yeah, it's still seasonal. Like, you're going to see, different weather patterns in different seasons. So you still have to wait. It's not like a wave pool out here, but there is, it is a surfer's paradise. However, I will say in the Northeast, you have to get on the waves right when it's on, and like literally the waves could go away at any point. So 15 minutes, 30 minutes, the swell could die off. But in New Zealand, it's a little bit more forgiving. It's a little bit different in that, these swells last, days and days. And so um, yeah, it's it's a little bit less stressful surfing in New Zealand because you're surfing in the Northeast. You're like, oh, I don't know if the waves are going to turn off. You know, it's like, but in New Zealand, it's a little bit more forgiving. So it's pretty nice.
But today we're talking about surf forecasting, and I think we all know that Surfline is otherwise known as Surflies. And I want to ask you, does this basically mean that all the surf apps suck for one reason or another?
Yeah. So listen, I think Surfline gets a bad rap, but there are so many elements that go into a surf forecast, and I've been studying it for, I mean, decades now. And there are a lot of things that can go wrong with a surf forecast. For one, it's pretty difficult to accurately forecast wave heights. It requires a lot of effort. But then you have other factors like wind and tide that could throw the whole thing off. And so even if you do get that incredibly difficult problem right, which is accurately predicting wave heights, there are other factors that can completely throw off that forecast, and that being tide and wind. And so it's a very difficult problem.
So why is predicting wave height specifically so hard?
Yeah, so the important thing to understand is that all of the surf sites in the world start with the same set of data, or there are very few data sources that a surf forecasting site can start with, and that data is basically the height of the waves out in the ocean. And we don't really care about height of the waves in the ocean unless we're on a boat. But we're not on a boat, we're on a surfboard. And so what we care about as surfers is surf height. And so the waves out in the ocean are related to the surf height, but they're not the same thing. And so that's the first thing to understand. And if you're looking at a surf forecasting app other than Surfline, it is important to understand what data they are giving you, because some sites are actually, the majority of sites give you the height of the waves in the open ocean, and they don't bother translating that into surf height, which is what we care about as surfers. Now, Surfline does do this, but again, that is an algorithm, that is a problem that is relatively difficult to solve. And there are very few surf sites that go that extra mile. And so that's just surf height alone. And so there are just so many variables and so many factors. And there are a lot of places where it can fall down.
So would you say that we are trying to predict something that is fundamentally unpredictable?
I wouldn't be so quick to say that. I think you can predict it within a reasonable degree of tolerance, basically. There are two main types of surf. There's long period surf and there's short period surf. And short period surf is a result of weather systems that are closer to the shore. And long period surf is a result of larger systems that are further away. Longer period swells are more easily predictable than shorter period swells, because they're closer and they're just more dynamic and just they're less predictable. So if you sort of, in the surf forecasts, this is kind of a neat little hack. If you see a longer period swell, so something like 13 or 14 seconds, basically 12 or up, 14 seconds swell period has a sort of a higher chance in general of being accurate. So when it does hit. Now, of course, that's not the only thing that goes into a surf forecast. And so lots of other things can go wrong. But in general, longer period swells are a little bit more predictable than shorter period swells.
So I'm thinking, is there basically a disconnect between what we as surfers expect to see in the app and what the surf apps are actually showing us? And maybe it's down to us to understand our local breaks, so then we know exactly what the conditions should be for us to be happy. You know, surf height, wind, whether it's, we would love offshore, but how much of an onshore wind we can handle and so on. And wave energy is it basically down to a surfer to understand it better, to then be happier with a surf app.
Yes, exactly. I think you've nailed it. So the first thing to understand is something that I mentioned earlier, which is the surf forecast that you're looking at showing you swell height, or is it showing you surf height? And swell height is the waves in the open ocean, and surf height is the waves breaking on the beach. And so once you've determined that the site is showing you an estimated surf height, then you're still not done. You still got to go down to the beach, right? You got to observe it. You got to know your local tides, because like it's very, very difficult for a global surf forecasting site to know exactly what tide heights are going to work for a certain spot, right? There's so many things, and that's something I'm trying to build, but it is a very difficult problem, and so I think the surf forecast is a good place to start, but knowing your local break and going and checking it several times is it is important, and it requires a little bit of work, but it's kind of cool because you can spot things that other people might not see. And so once you get used to your break, you can you have this advantage, this like sort of home field advantage of when it might be good. And then also, you might have very specific wave preferences. And so the Surfline might be saying fair to good, but you know that you've been in those conditions before and you've had a great time. So, these ratings that they're giving you are very broad suggestions, and they're not even personalized to you. And so that's one huge weakness that I recognized very, very early on. Is we're all looking for different waves, and we all have different preferences. And so that's part of the reason that I built Swellify is like I understand, I get you're going to have very specific preferences. Everybody's going to have specific preferences, and why not be able to set those preferences so that you can be, so the ratings are personalized to you.
My preference is 1 to 2 offshore and poor to fair. Because I know it's not going to be busy.
Exactly. Exactly.
If it's going to be, fair or good, then everybody's going to be in the water and I'm going to feel uncomfortable. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So I saw this coming, and you can actually be notified if you set up your favorite spots correctly in Swellify. You can actually narrow down those conditions, and it can actually send you emails and push notifications for when your conditions match.
You're in New Zealand, and your app right now primarily covers New Zealand surf spots. So I'm guessing you believe that local knowledge really matters.
Absolutely. So in New Zealand, there are all kinds of offshore islands, and breaks exist in sort of bays and nooks and crannies. And so, and this is another reason that if a site is showing you swell height and not surf height, they're not doing the required work that it's going to take to provide an accurate surf forecast for you. So there can be a lot of things happening out in the ocean, but how those waves interact with the coastline is a really, really important and crucial part of what actually happens at the beach, which is all we care about. And so in setting up Swellify, I painstakingly reviewed the coastline and looked at every single spot and made sure that all the beach facing angles and all the offshore islands and all the nooks and crannies of everything out in the ocean was taken into account before I provide a surf forecast for you. And so, in doing that for the entire world, you can imagine that's a pretty big task. I'm up for it, but it is a huge task, and I think most surf sites aren't going to want to do that. But I think it's a valuable goal because I don't believe in doing anything unless it's awesome. And so, um,
Well,
yeah, I think that local knowledge is crucial.
that also means that your surf forecast should be more precise, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. I stand by my surf forecasts. If somebody were to email me tomorrow and say, "Hey, I went out and it was just not what you said it was," I would write down that spot, that time, that day, that tide. I want to provide the most accurate surf forecast possible, and I will, because I've felt the pain. I have felt the pain of driving an hour and a half to Rhode Island and to have it just not be anything. And it's just like that is this is a terrible, terrible feeling. And I never want anybody to experience that. And so, obviously it's forecasting. If you're the weatherman, you can get it wrong, right? And in forecast, any sort of forecast can be wrong. There's no crystal ball, unfortunately. If there was, I'd buy one, and I'd use it for Swellify. But I've felt that pain of forecasting, and everybody's gonna be wrong some of the time, and it's just a matter of what you want to be wrong less. You want to be less wrong, I guess.
I certainly felt that pain too in the UK. The difference was that I drove for 5 hours and it took me
Oh,
11 hours coming back. So it's the high
oh,
price you pay
high
for
stakes, high
getting it
stakes. Yeah,
getting it wrong.
high
Yeah.
stakes game. Yeah, yeah.
Thankfully,
Certainly on something I understand.
thankfully at that point I didn't particularly care because I was just learning. So I would
Yes,
take white water and it was
yes,
all
yes,
good.
yes. You just
But
got to make the most of it.
yeah. But when I started surfing, there were no cams, right? There was no video footage whatsoever of any surf spots. And I believe Surfline is the only global surf forecasting app that has cam footage, obviously not everywhere. Do you think it puts other surf forecasting apps at disadvantage? Or do you think that we rely on cam footage a little bit too much?
Yes, so that's a really interesting question. I've thought a lot about this because I am creating a surfing service, and I thought about whether or not I wanted to incorporate cams into the app. But there are a couple of things that are interesting about cams because they seem like the ideal scenario where you're like, oh, well, you got to have a cam, right? Well, I mean, there are a few problems that, and this was very evident in the early days when people first started setting up cams. There are a lot of people that were really pissed off. And the reason being that if everybody can see when it's good, everybody's going to go. And now that surf spot is really crowded when it's good. And so wherever you set up a cam, you set up the potential for it to be a very, very, very crowded surf spot. So if you like surfing with other people, then by all means, buy the cam subscription and follow the cams. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But um, the other thing is that the cams just give you that moment in time. And so if you are, for instance, an hour and a half to 2 hours away, you could check it out on the cam and it looks really good. And then you drive to the shore and by that point it's not good. And so that's when you really want a good forecasting app. And so I think for Swellify, I might think about adding cams at some point, but I'm really, really, really focused on the forecast. Um, the reason being that, you know, I think the forecasts can be pretty good, and that's life. If they're not good, sometimes they're not good, But if they're good most of the time, I think that's really, really, really valuable, and I just think that if you have cams you just get you bring with cams come crowds and if they had a cam at every spot it had the potential of everybody knowing whenever it's good all the time and so you would not be able to find any uncrowded waves at that point, which is just kind of a bummer.
It's a big problem for us surfers. We don't want any more surfers.
It's a very interesting thing because surfers have this wonderful like, yeah, man, just go with the flow. It's all good. But unless you're on my wave, in which case you need to F off because, it's this interesting dichotomy. It's actually a very selfish sport. So yeah, it's like you want as many waves um, as you can get, and everybody else has that same, that everybody's thinking the same thing, and so yeah, it's it's a really interesting
Waves are a
split there.
limited resource. What can we say?
They are, yeah, yeah, they sure are.
If you could design your perfect surf forecasting app for you as a surfer, what would it look like? What? Wait, you're actually designing it. So what does it look like?
Listen, I have used so many surf forecasting apps. They're all very, very, they throw a lot of information at you, and not all of it is relevant. And I think that, I mean, you see this with lots of products. They overcomplicate the interface. They throw too much information at you. And the irony of interface design is that it takes more effort to display fewer things on the screen, because good design is removing everything that's unnecessary and only keeping what is necessary. And that requires forethought. That requires you to understand what the user is trying to do. And so it takes a lot of effort to design a good surf forecast that's useful. And so that was sort of my design philosophy when I was creating Swellify, and I want that to carry through. I do not want to unnecessarily complicate the interface, but that's just the interface. So then you could have a great looking surf app, but the forecasts could be inaccurate. Sorry, and so that's a whole other problem that needs to be attacked, and so you need some sort of feedback mechanism, which is not currently available in Swellify yet, but it's in the plans.
It's not available.
I want to know.
So
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll see like, yes, Surfline will say, how was your session or whatever. Yeah, I would like to bring to I'd like to design a surf journaling feature, which could be super useful. You could mark days that were really good, and then I could recommend more of those days for you. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things I want to do for Swellify. But the best surf app will not let you miss any opportunities to surf, because we're all busy. We have limited opportunities to surf, and the best surfing app, however it may achieve that, is not going to let you miss an opportunity of a great surf session. And that's a core mission of Swellify, is to never let you miss a great surf.
And it's New Zealand right now. Which country or region is the next lucky one?
Yeah, so I'm doing it. I live in New Zealand full time now. New Zealand's got a huge surf culture. I would love to bring it to California. I'd love to bring it to the Northeast, where my stomping grounds. And I'd love to bring it to Australia. And so I think those are, if I'm going to expand, those will be actually. I'm not even going to say if. I'm going to say before the end of the year, I want to have all of California covered, and I want to have a lot of spots in the Northeast, East Coast, West Coast, and I want Australia as well.
We cannot wait.
It's so fun. I've gotten emails from people saying, "Oh, thanks so much. Like I just got a great surf session because of your app." And people there, you get critics, and that's painful and it stings, because this is, it's your baby, and somebody's attacking your product, which is you. And so it's a bit of a roller coaster, but in the end, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a really fun endeavor, and I just want Swellify to be useful to people and to help people surf more. That's it. Like that's the whole mission, is to help you surf more.
And that's all for today. Check out thewipyweekly.com for our free newsletter, more stories, and the surf directory for upcoming surf retreats, local events, and community listings. Thanks for listening. And I hope you get some waves this week.